I have a confession to make right off the bat today. There is this one specific word in the corporate dictionary that for years has just made me physically cringe.
Oh, I think I know where you're going with this.
I mean, a visceral, total, eye-rolling reaction every time I hear it in a meeting or see it on a performance review or,
Yeah.
spotted in a LinkedIn bio. You definitely know the word proactivity.
Yes. The dreaded P word. It definitely carries a whole lot of baggage.
It is the absolute worst.
Mm.
Because in the modern workplace, it usually just feels like code for do more work for the exact same amount of money. It
Right.
feels like, please answer your emails at 9 at night, or just general hustle culture, toxic positivity.
Yeah.
It's this weaponized buzzword middle management uses to guilt trip you into burnout.
This really is.
So naturally, when I saw the topic for our deep dive today, my guard immediately went up. But, and this is a massive bra, I looked at the stack of research we have for today, and I honestly think I owe the word an apology.
You actually might, because it turns out that before proactivity became this massive cliche on recruitment posters, it was actually a profoundly deep psychological and philosophical concept.
Yeah.
And if we look at the source material we're analyzing today, which is a lecture titled Proactivity and Wealth, the argument is incredibly distinct from the corporate version. The lecture argues that this concept is actually the master variable for financial freedom.
Which is just a huge claim to make. So just to be crystal clear for you listening right now,
Okay.
we are not talking about working harder or waking up at 4 in the morning to grind.
Not at all.
Yeah.
We are looking at proactivity not as a behavior, like staying late at the office, but as a cognitive architecture.
A cognitive architect.
Exactly. It is a specific neurological habit that dictates how the brain processes information. The central thesis here is that wealth isn't primarily determined by market returns or luck or even your job title. It is determined by the quality of the decisions you make in a very specific split-second window of time.
And this is what really hooked me when I was prepping. We are going to refer to this window as the gap. And to really understand the gap, we have to go on a bit of a journey.
A fascinating one.
The source stack for this deep dive is completely wild. We aren't just looking at financial charts here. We are pulling from existential philosophy, neuroscience, behavioral psychology, and game theory.
It's a deeply multidisciplinary approach, which honestly is often where the very best insights hide. We've got Viktor Frankl, the psychiatrist who survived the Holocaust. We have Daniel Kahneman, the Nobel Prize winner, who basically mapped how we think.
Yeah.
We have Robert Kiyosaki's financial strategies, and we have modern neuroscience regarding how neurons actually wire together. The goal today is to integrate all of that into one coherent framework for how to handle money, stress, and uncertainty.
So let's start unpacking this. If proactivity isn't just doing stuff around the office, what actually is it? And why do we need to rewind all the way back to 1946 to understand it?
Well, we have to start with Viktor Frankl. In 1946, he published Man's Search for Meaning. Now, context is everything here. Frankl didn't develop his theories in some comfortable university office with tenure.
Definitely not.
He developed them while being a prisoner in 4 different Nazi concentration camps, including Auschwitz.
Which really puts everything else we talk about into a stark perspective.
Right.
It strips away all the triviality of modern stress.
Absolutely. Think about his reality. He was stripped of literally every external freedom. His family, his property, his professional identity, his clothes, his hair, everything was taken. He was reduced to a number.
Yeah.
He faced starvation, typhus, torture, and the constant hourly threat of the gas chambers. But in that environment of total restriction, he made an observation that changed psychology forever. He realized there was one freedom that could not be taken away, no matter how brutal the guards were.
The internal freedom.
Exactly. The freedom to choose his response to what was happening to him. He realized that while they could completely control his caloric intake and his physical movements, they could not force him to hate them.
Wow.
They couldn't force him to give up hope or to lose his sense of self. He had to grant that permission. And this brings us to the foundational sentence of today's deep dive. Frankl wrote, "Between stimulus and response, there is a space. In that space is our power to choose our response. In our response lies our growth and our freedom."
Between stimulus and response, there's a space. That right there is the gap we are talking about.
That is the gap. And the lecture argues that this is not just a poetic metaphor for resilience, it is a biological reality. Every single moment of our lives, and specifically our financial lives, is a stimulus response cycle.
Okay, let's make this super concrete for the listener.
Yeah.
What does a financial stimulus response cycle actually look like out in the real world?
It happens every single day, often without us even noticing. Stimulus, the stock market drops 5% in an hour. Response, panic selling to stop the pain. Or stimulus, you see a flash sale on a luxury item you can't really afford. Response, impulse buying because of the dopamine hit. Stimulus, you get a pre-approved credit card offer in the mail. Response, you sign up without reading the terms because it feels like free money.
So the stimulus is the external event. It's the thing that happens to us. And the response is what we do. And usually, those two things feel like they are totally glued together. The market drops, I feel fear, I sell. It feels automatic. Like I didn't even make a choice.
It feels automatic because for most people, the gap is entirely closed. The lecture breaks down the neuroscience here, and it is fascinating. We're essentially running modern financial software on ancient hardware.
The hardware being our brains.
Yes, evolutionarily speaking, our brains haven't had a major update in about 50,000 years. We have two main systems at play here. We have the fast system, often associated with the amygdala. This system reacts in under 300 milliseconds.
300 milliseconds.
Very fast. It is designed for immediate physical threats. If a tiger jumps out of the bushes, you do not want a gap. You don't want to ponder the tiger. You want to run immediately.
Right. If I stop to contemplate the existential meaning of the tiger, or, check the tiger's teeth for cavities, I am lunch. Speed is survival.
Precisely. Speed is survival in the wild. But then we have the slow system, located in the prefrontal cortex. This is the newer part of the brain where logic, planning, mathematics, and long-term thinking happen.
That's sophisticated stuff.
Yes, but the problem is the prefrontal cortex is slow to boot up, and it is highly expensive energy-wise. It consumes a massive amount of glucose.
So when I see my portfolio tanking on my phone screen, my brain doesn't see unrealized losses in a diversified portfolio. It sees threat, tiger, danger.
Correct. The amygdala completely hijacks the system. It treats a financial threat like a physical threat to your safety. It triggers a literal fight-or-flight response. Cortisol floods your system. Your heart rate goes up. Tunnel vision sets in.
Just physical.
Very physical. So when we say someone is reactive, we mean they are operating on that ancient 300 millisecond loop. They are letting the external stimulus dictate the response immediately without checking in with the prefrontal cortex at all.
And Frankel's point, and the whole point of this lecture, is that we can hack that. We can force a wedge into that 300 millisecond loop and pry it open.
That is the exact definition of proactivity in this context. It is the deliberate, forceful widening of the gap between the stimulus and the response. It is the ability to feel the fear, because that's just the amygdala doing its job, but then pause.
To hold back.
To not let the fear touch the controls, to engage the prefrontal cortex and consciously choose a response that aligns with your values and long-term goals, rather than just reacting to the immediate visceral pain.
So building wealth isn't just about math. It's about biology. It's about whether you can keep your hand firmly on the wheel when your lizard brain is screaming at you to swerve into the ditch.
That is a perfect analogy. And this leads us directly into the psychology of control. Because once you manage to open that gap, once you create that space, the question becomes, who is driving the car? Who is making the decision?
Which brings us to a couple of heavy hitters in psychology, Julian Rotter and Albert Bandura. The lecture talks a lot about locus of control. I actually love this concept because it explains so much about why some people seem to just get money and others constantly struggle, even if they earn the exact same amount.
Julian Rotter introduced this in 1966. It is a spectrum of personality. On one far side, you have an external locus of control. These are people who fundamentally believe that outcomes are driven by luck, fate, the system, God, or powerful others.
Right.
Their internal narrative is always, I'm broke because the economy is bad, or I'm not rich because I wasn't born into the right family, or simply, the game is rigged.
And on the other side,
internal locus of control. This is the core belief that I influence outcomes. The narrative sounds like, I'm broke right now because I spent more than I earned, or I can build wealth if I take the time to learn how to invest, or even, the economy is bad, so I need to adjust my strategy.
Now, I could definitely hear people saying, and I've honestly thought this myself, but wait, the economy does matter. Luck actually does matter. Systemic inequality is incredibly real.
And the lecture completely admits that, right? It isn't saying external forces are fake.
Exactly. The sources are very careful about that. It's not about denying reality or being completely delusional. It's not saying you can personally control the Federal Reserve or the weather. It is about where you place your focus and your agency.
Where you put your energy.
Yes. And the data is overwhelming. The source material cites a huge meta-analysis of 135 studies showing that an internal locus of control is strongly correlated with higher income, better health, and greater career success.
There was a specific note in there about savings, too, that really struck me. It's fascinating. People with an internal locus save significantly more money. Why? Because saving is ultimately an act of faith in your own agency. If you believe your actions matter, saving makes logical sense. You are preparing for a future you can actively influence.
That makes total sense.
But if you believe it's all just a lottery, if you think the system might just take it all away tomorrow, or you might get hit by a bus, or it's all just random noise, then why bother denying yourself a treat today? Eating the fancy dinner right now is the only guaranteed win. The belief entirely dictates the behavior.
This connects directly to the second concept, self-efficacy. Albert Bandura. How is this actually different from locus of control? Because they sound very similar.
It is a subtle but absolutely critical difference. Locus of control asks, can this result be influenced? Self-efficacy asks, am I personally capable of doing the influencing?
Ah, okay. So I might believe that investing makes people rich. So I have an internal locus about money generally, but I might also genuinely believe that I am just way too stupid to understand the stock market.
Exactly. You might think, wealth is entirely possible, just not for me. And low financial self-efficacy is an absolute killer. It leads straight to avoidance. You know that feeling when you really don't want to open your banking app because you are terrified of what you'll see? So you just let the mail pile up.
The ostrich strategy. If I don't look at the debt doesn't exist.
That is pure avoidance driven by low self-efficacy. You fundamentally don't trust your own ability to handle the information, so you ignore it to protect your ego.
Which, of course, makes the problem exponentially worse because the compound interest never sleeps.
The lecture offers a very clear roadmap to fix this, drawing on Bandura's work. You do not build self-efficacy by standing in front of a mirror and giving yourself a loud pep talk. You build it through mastery experiences.
Small wins.
Tiny, microscopic wins. You don't try to overhaul your entire financial life in a single day. Just open the app, look at the balance, close it. That is a win. You faced the dragon and you didn't die. Then, maybe next week, track your spending for just one day. That's a win. Every single time you face a financial task and survive it, you are proving to your brain that you are capable. You are literally rewriting the narrative from I can't to I am doing it.
And speaking of rewriting narratives, we absolutely have to touch on Carol Dweck and the growth mindset. This is huge in education. We teach it to kids all the time now. But I hadn't really thought about applying it directly to money.
It applies perfectly to finance. A fixed mindset says, I'm just not good with numbers, or I'm not a business person. It treats financial literacy as an innate talent you are born with, like having blue eyes or being tall.
I hear this constantly from friends. Oh, my partner handles the money. I'm just not wired for it.
And that is a tragedy because the growth mindset dictates that financial intelligence is a muscle, not a genetic trait. No one is born understanding a corporate balance sheet. Warren Buffett wasn't born understanding a price-to-earnings ratio. He learned it.
He had to read the books.
Exactly. The lecture emphasizes that adopting a growth mindset, the fundamental belief that I can learn this, is the absolute prerequisite for wealth. If you think you can't learn, you won't even try to open the gap. You'll just accept your fate.
So, we have the foundation laid out. We know the gap exists, thanks to Frankel. We know we need to believe we can influence outcomes through Rotter, and that we are capable of learning through Bandura and Dweck. Now let's bring in Stephen Covey, The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People.
A massive classic. It is sitting on millions of bookshelves around the world.
But the lecture points out something I actually didn't know. Covey's very first habit, be proactive, is directly ripped from Viktor Frankl.
It absolutely is. Covey essentially took Frankl's deep existential philosophy and packaged it for the American business world, and he gave us a truly great visual tool to understand it.
The circles.
The circle of concern versus the circle of influence. I love this visual. So, imagine 2 concentric circles. The big outer one is the circle of concern. This contains everything you care about. The war in Europe, the national debt, the weather, what the Federal Reserve is doing with interest rates, what your neighbor thinks of your new car.
Basically, all the things that stress me out at night.
Things that stress you out, but, and this is the vital key things, you have zero control over. You cannot change the national debt. You cannot change the weather. Now, inside that big circle is a much smaller circle, the circle of influence. This is what you can actually change. Your spending habits, your skill acquisition, who you network with, your asset allocation, your diet.
The lecture makes a pretty brutal point here regarding investors. It says, Reactive investors relentlessly obsess over the circle of concern.
They really do. They are total news junkies. They doom scroll. They complain about the macro economy at dinner parties. They let the macro dictate their daily mood. If the market is down, they feel small and helpless. They are actively leaking cognitive energy into a black hole.
And proactive investors do the opposite.
They completely ignore the noise. They focus their energy solely on the circle of influence. They look at the news and say, okay, the economy is entering a recession. That is a fact I cannot change. Given that fact, what is my best move?
Right.
Should I increase my cash reserves? Should I look for undervalued assets? They don't waste a single ounce of energy wishing reality was different. They use all their energy to navigate the reality that actually exists.
This brings up the language audit section, which I loved.
Yeah.
The fundamental difference between saying I can't and saying I won't.
It sounds like pure semantics, but it is actually cognitive programming. If you say, I can't afford that, your brain instantly shuts down. The problem is solved. The answer is no. You position yourself as a victim of your bank account. But if you say, how can I afford that? Your brain immediately switches into problem-solving mode.
Or even saying, I choose not to buy that.
Exactly. I am choosing not to prioritize that right now.
Yeah.
That phrasing keeps the agency entirely with you. You aren't being deprived by the universe. You're being disciplined by choice.
I can't is a padlock on the brain. How can I is a key.
And I have to is another incredibly dangerous one. I have to go to work. No, you don't. You choose to go to work because you highly value the consequences, getting paid, having a roof over your head, building a career more than you value the alternative, which is unemployment and poverty.
That sounds pretty harsh, though. Try telling that to someone working 2 jobs just to survive.
It is harsh, but Frankl would argue it is the only true path to dignity. Even in the death camp, where he had virtually no choices, he intensely focused on the tiny choices he did have. When you realize you are choosing your constraints, you reclaim your agency. You aren't a victim of your job. You are an active participant in an economic transaction.
Yeah.
That shift in perspective is the very essence of Covey's proactivity. It turns you from a pawn into a player.
Okay, moving on to Daniel Kahneman. We touched on the fast and slow systems briefly, but there's an acronym here that honestly blew my mind. WYSIAD.
WYSIAD. What you see is all there
He
is.
sounds like a Zen Kohen or something, straight out of the Matrix.
It is actually a profound warning about how our brains construct reality. System 1, the fast, emotional brain, is a storytelling machine. It deeply craves coherence. It takes whatever information is right in front of its nose, the visible data, and weaves a completely coherent story out of it.
Just jump into conclusions.
Constantly.
Yeah.
It does not pause to ask, what information am I missing? It just assumes that what it currently sees is the whole entire universe.
So apply this to investing for us. How does WYSIAD actually lose me money?
Imagine you read one really positive article saying a company has a revolutionary new battery technology. That is the what you see. Your System 1 immediately builds a story. Innovative tech equals successful company equals stock price goes straight up. You feel confident, you feel excited, you hit buy.
But what am I missing in that scenario?
Everything else. Is the company actually profitable? Do they have massive crippling debt? Is the stock price already super high because everyone else already knows about the battery? What about their competitors? System 1 does not care about any of that because it didn't see it in that one article. The proactive investor, the System 2 user, has to deliberately pause and ask, what remains hidden? What do I not know?
That is such a fantastic question to just tape to your computer monitor. What do I not know?
It stops the availability bias dead in its tracks. Availability bias is the tendency to think that whatever we heard most recently is the absolute most important thing. It forces you to hunt for disconfirming evidence, which is something the human brain naturally hates doing.
Now, here's where the plot of the lecture really twists.
Yeah.
Up until now, we have been basically bashing the emotional brain, the amygdala, System 1, as the primary villain. We keep saying, don't be emotional, be logical. We want to be rational robots. But then the source introduces Antonio Damasio and says, actually, you need emotion to make money.
This is what Damasio calls Descartes' error. For a very long time, classical economics thought the perfect decision maker was essentially Mr. Spock from Star Trek.
Yeah.
Pure logic, absolutely no feeling, cold, hard calculation. Damasio proved neurologically that this is impossible.
Because he studied people with specific brain damage, right?
Yes, specifically patients with damage to the ventromedial prefrontal cortex, the VMP-FC. These patients had their logic completely intact. They could do complex math, they could analyze grammar flawlessly, they could discuss nuanced politics, but they had completely lost the physical connection between their reasoning and their emotions. They couldn't feel good or bad about a potential outcome.
So shouldn't they have been the absolute perfect, rational investors?
You would naturally think so, but in reality, they couldn't make decisions at all. They would spend 30 straight minutes deciding which color pen to use to sign a document, or where to eat lunch. They would analyze the menu, the driving distance, the price, the seating arrangements, but they physically could not pick one.
Why? What was missing?
Because logic provides the options, but emotion provides the value. Without a gut feeling, what Damasio technically calls a somatic marker that says, this option feels better than that one, all options look entirely the same. You get stuck in an infinite loop of analysis paralysis.
So emotions are actually data.
Exactly. Emotions are a highly efficient pre-filter. They are data compression. When you look down a dark alley and immediately feel fear, that is your brain summarizing 1,000 subconscious data points, shadows, silence, echoes, maybe a memory of a scary movie, into a single physical sensation. It's an evolutionary shortcut to help you survive.
But wait, earlier we definitively said the amygdala is the enemy. If I feel fear when the stock market drops, isn't that a bad thing?
Here is the critical nuance, and this is the mastery part of the deep dive's title. It is not about suppressing your emotion, it's about emotional literacy.
Emotional literacy.
There was a truly fascinating study conducted by Andrew Lowe and his team regarding expert traders versus absolute novices. They hooked both groups up to physiological monitors, skin conductance, heart rate, the works. When the market went crazy and volatility heavily spiked, the novices obviously panicked. Their heart rates went up, they started sweating. Do you know what happened to the veteran expert?
They stayed completely calm. Flatline.
No. They had the exact same physiological reaction. They sweat, their hearts raced, they felt the fear just as intensely as the rookies did.
Really? That is surprising.
Yes. The difference wasn't in the feeling at all, it was in the action. The novice felt the fear and treated it as a direct command. Sell. Get out now. The expert felt the exact same fear and treated it as information.
My body's telling me risk is high right now. Okay, noted.
Okay, noted. Now, what does the chart actually say? Is this a buying opportunity?
That is profound. We tend to assume that wealthy, highly successful people are just ice cold. But they aren't. They just don't let the feeling take the steering wheel.
They have a much wider gap. They feel the somatic marker, they decode it logically, and then they choose. They use the emotion as a warning light on the dashboard, not as the steering wheel itself.
Okay, let's talk about the marshmallow test. Because you really cannot talk about psychology and wealth without bringing up marshmallows.
It is the classic experiment. Walter Mischel, Stanford, 1972. You put a kid in a room with a marshmallow. You tell them if they wait 15 minutes, they get 2 marshmallows.
And for decades, the universal takeaway from that was, willpower is everything. If you can wait, you'll be rich and successful. If you eat it immediately, you're doomed to a life of failure. It was framed almost as a moral judgment on the kids.
But the lecture explicitly brings up the modern update. The replication study done by Watts and colleagues in 2018, it turns out, if you properly control for family background and baseline wealth, the correlation between waiting and lifelong success mostly disappears.
Whoa, so willpower doesn't actually matter.
No, willpower certainly matters. But the reason the kid eats the marshmallow matters far more. Think about it. If you grew up in a chaotic, highly unstable home where adults constantly break promises, where food is scarce, where things get stolen from you.
Then eating the marshmallow right now is actually the most rational choice you can make.
Exactly. If you cannot fundamentally trust the environment to deliver the second marshmallow later, you secure the asset sitting right in front of you. That is deeply logical. It is adaptive behavior for a scarce environment.
This connects directly to the concept of scarcity by Melanathan and Shafir. This idea of a bandwidth tax.
This is so critical for having empathy and for building actual financial strategy. Scarcity, the state of simply not having enough money, literally lowers your functional IQ.
Literally.
Literally. They tested sugarcane farmers in India. These specific farmers get paid once a year, right after harvest. So before the harvest, they are poor, they've run out of cash. After the harvest, they're suddenly rich. The researchers gave them cognitive tests at both of those times.
And what were the results?
Before the harvest, when they were heavily stressing about money and survival, they scored significantly lower. The effect was roughly equivalent to losing 13 IQ points, or going a full night without sleep. After the harvest, with money safely in their pockets, their scores jumped right back up to normal. Same brain, entirely different bandwidth.
Because when you are actively worried about making rent or feeding your kids, your brain is constantly running a massive background process that eats up all your RAM.
Exactly. It completely consumes your cognitive resources. So when we cheerfully tell people living paycheck to paycheck to just be proactive and think 30 years ahead, we are asking them to do something that is cognitively much, much harder for them than for a wealthy person. They are basically trying to run a marathon while carrying a 50-pound backpack.
So you really can't just mindset your way out of structural poverty without acknowledging that bandwidth tax.
You have to do both simultaneously. The lecture argues that proactivity is the way out. You absolutely have to find that gap. But it also heavily acknowledges that the climb is much steeper. You have to build a financial floor, an emergency fund, not just for the math of it, but to literally free up your brain's processing power.
Money buys you the cognitive bandwidth to make better decisions about money. It's a feedback loop.
A virtuous cycle. Or a vicious one if you are going the other way.
Let's pivot to a very practical framework now.
Yeah.
Most people know Robert Kiyosaki for Rich Dad, Poor Dad, but the lecture focuses heavily on his cash flow quadrant, and it reinterprets it in a really interesting way.
Yes. Usually, people see the quadrant, which is employee, self-employed, business owner, and investor, as just a list of job titles or tax brackets. But the lecture views it instead as a proactivity map.
Walk us through that map.
On the left side, the employee side, the external environment provides all the structure. You have a boss. You have a detailed job description. You have a guaranteed payday every 2 weeks. The gap is essentially filled by the employer. You don't have to decide what to do on a random Tuesday morning. You are explicitly told what to do.
So your internal proactivity muscles can actually atrophy.
Precisely. It is very safe, but it does not train the brain for independence. It's somewhat like living in a zoo versus living out in the wild. The zoo is safe, and you always get fed on time, but you slowly lose your hunting instincts.
Now look at the right side of the quadrant. Investor or business owner? Who tells you what to do on Tuesday morning?
Nobody at all.
Who guarantees your paycheck on Friday?
No.
That is a high ambiguity environment. To survive over there, you need massive internal structure. You need a highly developed internal locus of control. You have to create the gap yourself every single day.
This perfectly explains why so many people fail when they try to quit their secure job and start a business. They have the technical skills, they know how to bake amazing cookies or write brilliant code, but they do not have the underlying psychological software.
They try to run a System 2 life with a System 1 brain.
Exactly. The very moment the external structure of the job is gone, the amygdala completely freaks out because of the massive uncertainty. Where is the paycheck? What do I do right now? If you haven't explicitly trained for that, you will retreat straight back to the safety of employment.
So the practical advice here is don't just quit your job blindly. Train the muscle while you are still employed.
Exactly. Treat your current job as an investor would. Be proactive within the safety net. Practice making decisions. Start a small side hustle, not just for the extra cash, but to actively train your brain to handle ambiguity. Build the psychological infrastructure before you load the entire weight of your livelihood onto it.
I love that phrase, psychological infrastructure. We always talk about financial infrastructure like bank accounts and LLCs, but the mental part has to come first.
It absolutely has to.
So how do we systematically build it? The lecture gets into neuroplasticity here. Neurons that fire together wire together. This is Hebb's rule.
This is actually the very best news in all of this research. You aren't stuck with the brain you currently have. Neuroplasticity means the brain is highly malleable. Every single time you act proactively, you are physically rewiring your brain. You are thickening the neural connection between the prefrontal cortex and the amygdala.
But the reverse is also true, right?
Yes, unfortunately. Every time you panic sell or impulse buy or avoid looking at your bank account, you are reinforcing the neural pathway of reactivity. You are greasing the slide into bad habits. You are making it physically easier to fail the next time.
So we clearly need training tools. The lecture lists 3 specific ones. Let's go through them. Number 1 is mindfulness. And I know some people tune out the second they hear that word.
They really shouldn't. And we aren't talking about it in a mystical woo-woo sense. Mindfulness is essentially just weightlifting for the prefrontal cortex. It strengthens the executive control pathway. It teaches you to observe a thought like, I am scared, or I really want to buy this, without becoming the thought. That ability to stand slightly outside your own brain and watch it work, that is the very essence of the gap.
Number 2 is journaling, but specifically retrospective gap journaling.
This is all about reviewing your game tape, like an athlete. You make a financial decision, maybe a good one, maybe a terrible one. Later, when you are perfectly calm, you write it down. What did I decide? Why did I decide it? What was I physically feeling? What narrative was my system one telling me? This builds metacognition, which is thinking about thinking. It helps you accurately spot your own biases so you can catch them before they act next time.
It's like a debriefing after a military mission.
Exactly. If you never review your decisions, you cannot possibly improve your decision-making process.
And number 3 is premortems. I think this one is my absolute favorite.
This is Gary Klein's technique. Most corporate teams do a postmortem when a project completely fails to figure out why it died. A premortem happens before you even start. You say, okay, imagine it is 1 year from today and this investment has failed catastrophically. It is a total disaster. What happened?
Oh, that is so clever. Because it forces you to look at the severe downsides without being accused by your team of being a pessimist. You're just playing a structured game.
It completely tricks the brain into bypassing the optimism bias. It forces your logical system to aggressively look for threats that system one is totally ignoring because it's too excited about the shiny story. It is an incredibly powerful way to widen the gap before you commit any real money.
We are coming down to the wire here,
Mhm.
but we absolutely have to address the dark side. Because this concept of proactivity can get toxic really fast if misunderstood.
Yes, we definitely have to distinguish Frankel's deep proactivity from modern hustle culture. Hustle culture dictates never stop, sleep when you're dead, grind constantly. Frankel says choose your response. And sometimes the absolute most proactive response you can choose is to rest.
Right. If you are actively burning out, pushing yourself harder isn't proactive. It's actually reactive. You are just blindly reacting to a fear of failure or a fear of falling behind your peers.
Correct. True proactivity includes recognizing your circle of influence over your own physical health. If you completely destroy your engine trying to win the race, you haven't actually won. You have just crashed faster.
And there's a real ethical piece to this, too. The lecture mentions the idea of the calm response to an angry boss. You can do that to be manipulative, to make them feel guilty or look bad, or you can do it because it genuinely aligns with your core values.
The outward behavior looks exactly the same. You are staying calm. But the internal intent matters immensely. Proactivity at its core is about integrity. It's about acting in accordance with who you deeply want to be, not just trying to win a momentary power game. Sustainable wealth, and frankly, sustainable life, is built on values, not just clever tactics.
So let's synthesize all of this for the listener. We started our journey in a concentration camp with Viktor Frankl, finding internal freedom in the darkest place imaginable. We traveled through the neuroscience of the fast amygdala and the slow prefrontal cortex. We looked at the math of probability with Kahneman, the crucial role of emotion with Damasio, and the crippling structural bandwidth tax of the sugarcane farmers.
And it all leads back to one undeniable conclusion. Proactivity is the operating system. Financial freedom is merely the output. If the operating system is buggy, the output will inevitably be buggy.
The lecture ends with a really cool thought about Kiyosaki's board game, Cashflow 101. I've played it before. It's essentially Monopoly on steroids.
It really is. And the lecture argues that the game isn't actually about learning money mechanics. It is a literal simulator for the gap. It is a safe, contained place to physically practice feeling the greed, feeling the fear, and consciously choosing a rational strategy anyway. It teaches you to look at a balance sheet not as a moral report card of your worth as a human being, but simply as a dashboard you can control.
The most important asset isn't the stock you buy. It's the space you cultivate between the market's noise and your decision. That is the exact quote from the end.
That is the ultimate takeaway. The market will always be incredibly noisy. The global economy will always be uncertain. The stimulus will never, ever stop. But if you can master the response, if you can truly master the gap, you have mastered the entire game.
Now, to leave you with a final thought to mull over on your own. We've talked all about training our human brains to widen this gap. But look at the modern financial world today. Wall Street is dominated by algorithmic trading and AI bots that execute trades in literal microseconds. They operate entirely without a gap, completely devoid of emotion, moving faster than human biology can even comprehend. So as these machines close the timeline between stimulus and response to absolute zero, how does human proactivity adapt? Will our slow, deliberate prefrontal cortex be our greatest liability in a machine speed market? Or will that human capacity to step back and find meaning be the one advantage algorithms can never replicate?
That is a phenomenal question.
Thanks for diving in with us today. We will see you in the next one.